超変形パチンコフィーバー超時空要塞マクロス3強
Now that the crew of the SDF-1 had broken through the enemy lines of the ZENTRAEDI and safely returned to Earth, Captain Gloval sits in his captain's quarters, dictating a detailed report for the High Command of the ROBOTECH Defense Force, formed to guard the planet from the inevitability of extraterrestrial threats. This episode is a little different in the way that it gives an excuse to recap the many adventures of our heroes and villains in this story for any audience coming in late to the game. Such a clip show was handy back in the days of broadcast television, and a standard for most TV shows, especially for anime. Usually bookended by some wraparound of a character dictating the many events they had all been through, this particular episode doesn't do much except help remind us of what important points in the story and world we've learned so far, especially for what we've learned about the ZENTRAEDI. We are reminded of their desire to capture the SDF-1, the fact that they are just like humans except for their enormous size. And their whole culture, we've learned, is entirely militaristic. Also, they have a segregated society, with their males and females living and operating separate from one another. They are so strong and resilient, they can even survive unprotected in the vacuum of space for a time. And yet, they nearly faint at the sight of something as simple as a man and a woman interacting face to face, let alone kissing one another. In fact, they regard their own reaction to this as some form of weapon being used against them by the Micronians, as they call the humans of Earth. When speaking of such things, the ZENTRAEDI often call back to a term they use, the word protoculture. Now, I thought this would be a good opportunity to discuss what protoculture is in both Super Dimension Fortress Macross and Robotech as well. There's a bit to go over, and I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of this topic, but please, feel free to comment below if I missed something or don't quite get it right. Whew, here we go. Now, in the original Macross, protoculture is the term for an ancient race of humanoid beings that were the progenitors of humans, ZENTRAEDI, and some other faction known as the Supervision Army, and probably a few other societies as well. For example, the Proto-Devlin, but let's not get into that. The protoculture were essentially like our Earth culture today, in the way that they had music, art, commerce, love, and war. The ZENTRAEDI, as a race, were genetically engineered by the Protoculture Society as a police force, a military fleet, purged of most emotional feelings outside of the more aggressive kinds one would typically need for fighting. Yet, the mnemonic memory of those emotions still existed in the genetic code of these giants. Of course, those emotions still surface upon witnessing the Microns express feelings of love or joy, or the kind of feelings that come from music and song. And, oh yeah, even movies have a certain effect as well, it turns out. So when the ZENTRAEDI of Macross talk about the humans, or Microns, having protoculture, typically, they are referring to the aspects of their society and culture which elicit these dormant mnemonic feelings in the giants. Well then, what is protoculture when it comes to Robotech? If there's one aspect that gets a little convoluted in the merging of these separate anime series that make up Robotech, it's protoculture. But it's not too confusing, it's just different from Macross. Eventually, in Robotech, we will meet the Robotech Masters. In this series, they are the ones who created the ZENTRAEDI, much like the society referred to as protoculture in Macross. But the protoculture of Robotech is very specifically an endless and dynamic energy source. derived from the Invid flower of life, the germination of its seeds and sprouts emitting this amazing power. These seeds germinate in a matrix, much like a living culture propagating in a petri dish. There's a certain power of creation and change inherent in this culture, hence protoculture. In the novels of Robotech, it's almost a sentient, multidimensional, omniscient entity. James Luceno himself, who makes up one half of the duo of authors under the Jack McKinney pseudonym, even likens it to the Force from Star Wars. But however you look at it, there are many mysterious properties to protoculture in Robotech. Even the Robotech masters themselves are ignorant of most of them, all but the Robotech master Zor, who had beguiled the Invid Regis in order to learn the secrets of the Flower of Life. But that's a tale for another time. Suffice it to say, Zor was the only one able to make a protoculture matrix, and knowing of the lust for even more power that had corrupted the Robotech masters and ZENTRAEDI both, he hid the secrets of protoculture and robotechnology aboard his personal battle fortress and meant to hide it across the galaxy on a tiny remote blue world. And we see how that's turned out thus far. Which I guess brings us back to the reports currently being dictated. Captain Gloval continues his report up to the inclusion of Lisa Hayes' encounter with the leader of the ZENTRAEDI, and her conclusion that outright war with them would mean the end of the human race.
They have more firepower than we can even imagine. Well, the situation is extremely critical and drastic measures will... Yes, what is it?
I thought you might like some fresh coffee, Captain.
Thank you, Lisa. That was very kind of you. It smells wonderful. I did not realize what time it was.
There we are, sir. Wow. I never thought I'd see anything as beautiful as this ever again.
Yes, I feel the same way. You know, I have a confession to make. Now, it seems a little silly, but I had a bad omen when I took command of the ship, that something terrible would happen. It was a feeling that is very difficult to explain, that something terrible would happen to us, that we would be changed forever.
Well, Captain, in a way, you weren't wrong.
This ship still has its secrets, Lisa. But what?
The captain, his crew, and the people of Macross had come so far to return to their beautiful world. They had learned so much about this enemy who had come to capture the SDF-1, including the knowledge that they could easily destroy all of mankind should they wish it. He had disobeyed orders by bringing the battle fortress back to Earth and would have to answer for that. But no matter what happened when the High Command received Gloval's report, he knew the SDF-1 and his crew were the best chance Earth had to combat these aliens and survive.